They gave him the ugliest and tallest Gar girl as a prize. Then they uncovered his true power. Adam Knight stood at the edge of the training area, looking out at the vast, glowing expanse of the arena. The intergalactic tournament was about to begin, and he was one of the selected champions. He didn't feel like a champion. In fact, he didn't feel like much of anything at all. He was just a soldier. That's what they told him to be. But that didn't mean he had to like it. This tournament, an annual event held by the Intergalactic Alliance, was famous for one thing. The winner would be given wealth, status, and a unique prize. But Adam wasn't concerned about the prize. He was here to do his job, and that was all. Winning the tournament didn't excite him. What interested him was the challenge, the fight, the rush of combat. But as the crowd cheered and the sound of metal clanged in the distance, Adam couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. He was about to face the greatest warriors across the galaxy, and yet his biggest concern was not the fight itself. It was what would happen after he won. The tournament was different this year. The prize wasn't just some jewel or a lavish title. The prize was a person. A trophy, an alien woman. Adam knew that whoever won would have to take her as a prize, but he hadn't thought much about it. What could it matter? She would be just another part of the reward, like a trophy you put on a shelf. He didn't expect to be chosen as the victor. After all, he wasn't the strongest or the fastest. But as the final match approached, he felt something stirring in his chest, a strange, unfamiliar feeling, something beyond just the desire to win. He couldn't explain it. When the announcement came, Adam was standing in the center of the arena, waiting for his next opponent. The voice of the announcer boomed across the stadium. And the champion of this year's tournament is Adam Knight. The crowd erupted in applause, but Adam barely heard it. His mind was already on what was to come next, the prize. He was led to a large platform where the prize was displayed. His eyes scanned the alien woman standing there. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, too tall for a human, and covered in thick, scaled skin that shimmered in the light. Her face was broad and strong with sharp features that most people would call ugly. But there was something in her eyes, something that spoke of strength and resilience. She was a Garalian, a species known for their towering stature and intimidating appearance. They were built for war, their kind warriors through and through. Yet Arca, this woman, stood there with a look of complete indifference, as though she had been through far too much to care about anything anymore. The moment Adam stepped forward, she turned her gaze toward him. There was a coldness in her eyes, but also something else, pain. And in that brief moment, Adam felt something stir deep inside him. He didn't know what it was, but it felt important. "Your prize," the voice of the overseer echoed, interrupting Adam's thoughts. "Arca of the Garalian race. She's yours now. Treat her well." The words didn't register at first. Adam looked at Arca again. She wasn't the kind of woman anyone would expect to win in a contest. Her size alone made her a target for mockery. She was out of place here, just like him. Adam felt a pang of discomfort. He had won. But the prize he had been given wasn't something he had wanted. No, he hadn't wanted any prize at all. "Arca," the overseer called again, "go with him." There was no protest in her eyes. She stepped forward and silently followed him off the platform, as though this had all been preordained, as though she had no choice in the matter. As they walked away, Adam couldn't help but notice how the other contestants eyed him. Some smiled knowingly, as if he had won something of value. Others looked away, as if they didn't care at all. But Adam knew that the truth of the situation was different. No one here cared about the prize. They only cared about the victory, the glory. The rest was irrelevant. The quiet hum of the transport ship filled the silence between them. Arca didn't speak. She didn't need to. Adam could sense her discomfort, her reluctance. But why? Why wasn't she fighting back? Why didn't she say something? After all, she was a warrior. When they finally arrived at the quarters that would serve as their temporary home during the tournament's closing celebrations, Arca stepped off the ship first. Adam followed slowly, taking in the surroundings. This was supposed to be a place of victory, but it felt more like a prison. Both of them were trapped here in one way or another. Adam didn't know why, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Arca than what the tournament had presented. She wasn't just a prize. She wasn't just some trophy. There was something in her that made her different from the others. When she turned to face him, her cold expression softened just slightly, and for the first time, Adam noticed the tiniest flicker of emotion in her eyes. Regret, loneliness. It was hard to say, but it was there. You don't have to stay here, Adam said quietly, his voice more serious than he meant it to be. Arca's eyes narrowed as though she didn't understand. You won, Adam nodded. I didn't ask for this. She stared at him for a long moment before looking away. It doesn't matter. What happens now is out of my hands. Adam was quiet for a moment, processing her words. He could tell that Arca had been through something. Her entire demeanor suggested a life of hardship, a life where she had been cast aside, never truly given the chance to live freely. And now she was nothing more than a prize, a trophy to be displayed by the winner of a cruel game. As Adam lay down on his bed that night, he found it hard to sleep. Thoughts of Arca kept him awake, but it wasn't just her appearance that troubled him. It was the feeling that there was more to her than what the galaxy had labeled her as. And somehow he knew that his role in this tournament was far from over. The prize had only just begun to reveal its true nature. The next morning, Adam woke early. The bright light of the twin suns filtered through the windows of their temporary quarters, casting strange shadows on the walls. He lay in bed for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. The strange feeling from yesterday hadn't gone away. His victory in the tournament seemed distant now, overshadowed by the responsibility that had been thrust upon him. He had no idea what to do with Arca. She wasn't just an ordinary prize, and there was something about her, something beyond her size, her appearance, or the way she carried herself. He couldn't explain it, but it was as if she held a secret, a part of herself hidden from the world. Adam got out of bed and went to the small kitchen area of their quarters. He didn't know if Arca would want breakfast, but he figured it wouldn't hurt to offer. He quickly prepared something simple, an energy drink and a ration pack. When he finished, he set it on the table and went to check on her. She wasn't in the room. He found her outside, standing on a balcony that overlooked the bustling spaceport below. Her massive form stood out even among the towering structures of the city. She was staring into the horizon, her posture rigid and tense, as if she was trying to push away the world around her. Arca, Adam said, his voice soft but steady. She didn't turn at first, and for a moment he thought she hadn't heard him. Then slowly she shifted and glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes were distant, almost blank, but there was a flicker of something beneath the surface. Something he couldn't quite place. I didn't expect you to be awake so early, Adam continued. I made some food. You might want to eat. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped closer to the edge of the balcony, looking down at the vast city below. It was clear that her mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts that Adam couldn't understand. I don't need your food, Arca finally said, her voice rough but not unkind. She was still looking out at the city, her eyes narrowed in thought. Adam wasn't sure how to respond. He had known people like Arca before, warriors who didn't show weakness, who didn't care for the comforts of others. But something about the way she said it, almost like she was trying to push him away, made him pause. He could tell that she wasn't just being difficult. There was something deeper going on. He took a step closer but stopped when he saw her tense up. She didn't want to talk, not yet. Adam respected that. He had seen enough soldiers push themselves to the brink of breaking and beyond, only to have it all come crashing down when they couldn't hold it together anymore. Arca was no different. She just carried it in a different way. I'm not here to make you feel uncomfortable, Adam said after a long silence. But I don't want you to be alone either. Arca finally turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made him hold his ground. Why do you care? She asked, her voice low. It was a question Adam had asked himself more than once. Why did he care about her? He barely knew her. She wasn't the kind of person he usually found himself drawn to. She was big, intimidating, and her race was known for being warriors, cold, calculating, and fierce. Yet there was something in her, something that made Adam feel like he wasn't the only one who had been dealt a bad hand. I don't know, Adam admitted. Maybe it's because I've seen people like you before, people who think they don't matter, that they're just broken. Arca's eyes narrowed at that. And what would you know about that? She asked. You won a tournament, you're a hero. Adam shook his head. I'm no hero. Her face hardened, and for a moment he thought he'd said something wrong. But then she let out a deep sigh and turned back toward the balcony. I wasn't always like this, she muttered, almost to herself. Once I was a warrior, I fought for my people, I was proud, but then everything changed. The war took everything. My family, my friends, my people, I'm just a leftover now, a trophy. Her voice cracked on the last word, and Adam could hear the pain behind it. She was stronger than she let on, but that didn't mean she didn't feel everything that had happened to her. She had lost much, and now she was stuck in a situation she hadn't chosen. Adam took a step closer. "I don't think you're a leftover," he said quietly. "I think you're someone who's been forgotten or maybe just overlooked, but I don't think that means you're nothing. You're not a trophy, Arca, not to me." Arca didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, staring into the distance. Adam waited, not pushing her, but just being there, offering the smallest piece of comfort he could. After a long silence, Arca finally spoke. "Why do you keep saying that?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Why are you trying to make me feel like I matter?" Adam shrugged, unsure of how to explain it. "Maybe I just don't want to see you throw yourself away. You're more than you think." She glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she turned her gaze back to the city, her fists clenched at her sides. "I don't know if I can believe that," she said quietly. "Not after everything I've seen." Adam understood. He didn't expect her to just accept his words. Trust wasn't something that could be given easily, especially after all that Arca had been through. But he was willing to wait. He wasn't going to push her. He wasn't going to force anything. "Maybe not today," he said, "but I'll be here, Arca, whenever you're ready." For a long time, she said nothing. Then, as if the weight of his words had finally sunk in, she nodded, just the slightest movement of her head. "Thank you," she murmured, almost too quietly for him to hear. Adam didn't say anything more. Instead, he turned and walked back to the table where he had left the food. He sat down and began to eat, letting the silence between them stretch out. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just there. For now, that was enough. Over the next few days, things didn't change drastically. Adam and Arca continued to share the space, but there was a certain calmness between them. Adam kept his distance, not pressing her to talk about her past or her feelings. He knew that would come when she was ready. Instead, they spent time together training, learning to work as a team, though they both knew they weren't just training for a fight. They were learning to trust each other. As the days passed, Adam found himself admiring Arca more and more. Not for her size or her strength, but for the quiet resilience she had. The same resilience he had buried deep inside himself for years. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Adam began to wonder if their paths were meant to cross. Perhaps they both had more in common than either of them realized. But for now, they were just two people, trying to survive in a universe that had a habit of throwing the worst at them. Adam had never been a fan of sitting idle, but that's exactly what they had been doing for the past few days. Since their arrival at the spaceport, there had been little more to do than wait for the next phase of the tournament to begin. He spent most of his time in the training room, running drills, improving his combat techniques, and trying to keep his mind sharp. But something about the place felt off. It wasn't the lack of action, it was the weight of what was to come. For Arca, things had been different. The time in the quiet quarters was making her more restless. She didn't talk much, but Adam could feel the tension building in her. She hadn't forgotten what had happened, nor had she accepted her new reality. He knew she didn't want to be here, that she didn't want to be treated as a prize. But the truth was, neither of them had much of a choice. They had been sent here together, as if the universe had decided to test them. Adam didn't know why, but he had a strange feeling that this wasn't just about winning some tournament or gaining glory. There was something bigger at play, and Arca. She wasn't just a prize, she was more. He could feel it. But what? He caught her in the training room the next morning, standing still with her back to him. Her eyes were closed, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and she was breathing slowly, deeply, as if trying to calm herself. She had been practicing the same motion over and over, a punch, followed by a series of rapid steps and then a block. Adam had seen it before. It was a standard move, one taught to soldiers and warriors alike, but there was something about the way Arca did it that made it seem more deliberate. It was as if she was fighting an invisible enemy, one that she couldn't escape. But what was it? Adam approached her slowly, his footsteps light against the cold metal floor. He didn't want to startle her, but there was something he needed to say. "Arca," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "You don't have to do this alone." She froze, her fists still clenched. But she didn't turn around. "I don't need your pity, Adam," she replied sharply, her voice tinged with bitterness. "I'm not giving you pity," Adam said. "I'm offering you a chance to work together, to stop pushing everyone away." There was a long pause. Adam could feel the tension between them, thick like a heavy fog. Arca's body was rigid, her muscles taut with restraint. Slowly, she opened her eyes and turned to face him. Her expression was guarded, but there was something in her eyes, something tired. "I don't know how to trust anyone anymore," Arca said quietly. "Not after everything, not after losing everything I've ever known." Adam could see the cracks in her tough exterior. He could see the pain she tried to hide, the hurt that she carried with her every single day. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her, losing her people, her home, her purpose. But Adam knew one thing for certain: she didn't have to face it alone. "I understand more than you think," he said. "I've lost people too. I've had my own battles. But it doesn't mean you have to carry it all by yourself." Arca didn't respond. She just stared at him for a long moment, as if searching for something, maybe for signs of insincerity, maybe for something to prove that he wasn't just saying empty words. But Adam wasn't lying. He wasn't offering her empty promises. Finally, she sighed and turned back toward the training mat. "Fine," she muttered, "but don't expect me to suddenly trust you. It's not that easy." Adam nodded. "I wouldn't expect it to be." For the rest of the day, they trained in silence. Adam showed her new techniques, helping her refine her movements, and she followed his instructions with precision, though her thoughts were clearly elsewhere. They didn't talk much. There was no need. They both understood that trust couldn't be rushed, it had to be earned. But Adam knew they were making progress, even if it didn't feel like it. Later that evening, after dinner, Adam sat by the window, staring out into the star-filled void of space. The hum of the ship's engines was constant, a low, comforting sound that helped to drown out the silence. But the quiet didn't bother him. It never did. He was used to being alone, used to fighting battles in his head long before he ever had to face them physically. But tonight, he wasn't alone. Arca sat across from him, a few meters away, but still close enough that he could see her out of the corner of his eye. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. But Adam could sense that she was thinking, her mind working over the words they had shared earlier. She was stubborn, no doubt about that, but Adam had learned over the years that even the toughest warriors needed someone to lean on. Even the strongest people had weaknesses, whether they wanted to admit it or not. He could tell Arca wasn't ready to talk about her past, but the fact that she was here, sitting in the same room with him, was a sign that she was beginning to trust him, just a little. The days went by slowly, each one passing in a blur of training, reflection, and quiet moments. But things started to shift between them. Slowly but surely, Arca began to let down her guard. She wasn't as closed off as she had been at first. She started to ask Adam about his past, about his own battles, his losses, and how he kept going despite it all. It wasn't much, but it was a start. One evening, as they sat together at dinner, Arca spoke again. This time, her voice was softer, more thoughtful. "You know," she said, looking down at her meal, "I used to think that everything could be solved with force, that if I was strong enough, if I was powerful enough, I could take on anything. But now I see that it's not just about strength." Adam listened intently, not interrupting. He knew that this wasn't easy for her to say. "I've spent so much of my life trying to prove myself," she continued, "trying to be the best, the strongest, but I've lost so much along the way. And now I wonder if all that power was ever worth it." Adam placed his fork down and looked at her. "You can be strong, Arca, but strength isn't just about fighting. It's about learning when to let go too, about knowing when to trust someone." Arca met his gaze then, her eyes filled with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity. It was the first time she had looked at him that way. It was the first time Adam felt like they were on the same page. "I'm not saying it's easy," Adam added, "but I believe in you. You're not just some trophy, you're more than that. You're a warrior, you're a person, and you deserve to be seen for who you really are." Arca's expression softened for a moment. She didn't speak, but Adam could see the tiniest crack in her armor. It was a start. And for now, that was enough. As the night drew on, Adam could feel a sense of quiet hope settling between them. There was still so much they didn't know about each other, still so much they hadn't said. But Adam had come to realize something. They didn't have to figure it all out right away. They had time. What mattered now was that they had each other. And for the first time since they had met, Adam didn't feel quite so alone. The weeks passed, and the tension between Adam and Arca began to slowly fade. Training was no longer just about combat techniques. It became a way for them to connect. They worked together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, slowly building a bond that neither of them had expected. The silence that once filled their days was replaced with the sound of shared laughter, quiet conversations, and the occasional challenge. Neither of them knew when it happened, but somewhere along the way, they had become more than just two people stuck in a room. They were a team. Despite their growing connection, Adam knew that the reality of the tournament was closing in. The final phase would soon begin, and they would be forced to face off against the Zarath Empire, the ruthless aliens who had been wreaking havoc across the galaxy. Adam didn't know much about the Zarath, but what he did know made his stomach tighten. They were vicious, brutal, and known for their overwhelming strength. He could only guess at the horrors they had seen and the battles they had fought, but Adam wasn't worried about that, at least not for himself. He was worried about Arca. She had come so far, had fought so hard to reclaim a piece of herself, and he couldn't bear to see her fall back into the darkness. He had promised her that she wouldn't be alone, and he intended to keep that promise. But the upcoming battle, the one they had both been preparing for, was a test neither of them were truly ready for. It wasn't long before Adam and Arca found themselves standing in front of a massive warship. The towering vessel belonged to the Zarath Empire, and its size alone was enough to send a chill down Adam's spine. It was a beast of a ship, dark and foreboding, with sharp edges and menacing lines that made it look like something out of a nightmare. The warship hovered silently above the battlefield, casting a shadow over everything below. Adam and Arca were positioned on a nearby platform, ready to board their own ship and make their way to the battlefield. There was no turning back now. The tournament was over. This was real. This was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could have anticipated. "Ready?" Adam asked, his voice low and steady. Arca glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be." They had trained together for weeks, preparing for this moment. Arca had improved greatly, learning to channel her strength in ways that made her a force to be reckoned with. She wasn't the same warrior she had been when they first met. She had discovered something new within herself, something powerful, and it was something that Adam had no doubt would make a difference on the battlefield. They boarded the ship and made their way to the control room, where the captain was waiting for them. The captain, a no-nonsense officer with a stern face and a calm demeanor, gave them a brief nod before turning to the navigational controls. "Time to go," the captain said, and with that the ship powered up and began its descent toward the battle zone. The battle was chaos. Adam had fought in his share of wars, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer intensity of this one. The Zarath were relentless. Their warriors charged forward without hesitation, their weapons flashing in the light as they cut through everything in their path. It was a battlefield unlike any Adam had ever seen, violent, brutal, and unforgiving. For the first time since entering the tournament, Adam felt fear, not for himself but for Arca. She was a force to be reckoned with, no doubt, but the Zarath warriors were powerful, and they fought with a savage rage that was almost impossible to match. He couldn't help but worry that this was too much for her, that the burden she had carried for so long might finally break her. But as they landed on the battlefield, Arca stepped out without hesitation, her massive form moving with purpose and confidence. She wasn't the same woman who had been handed to him as a prize. She was a warrior, someone who had found herself again. And as she faced the Zarath warriors charging toward her, she let out a battle cry that echoed across the field, a sound that sent shivers down Adam's spine. He wasn't sure where the strength had come from, but in that moment Arca was unstoppable. Adam followed closely behind her, his focus sharp, his movements precise. He had no time to think, only to act. The Zarath warriors were everywhere, and Adam was in the thick of it, moving through the chaos, his blade cutting through the air with deadly accuracy. But even as he fought, his eyes never left Arca. He needed to make sure she was okay. He needed to make sure she didn't fall. The battle raged on, but as the hours passed, Adam began to notice something. The Zarath were starting to falter. They were good, yes, but they weren't invincible. And Arca, with her new strength and her unwavering resolve, was taking them down one by one. She was a force of nature, her massive fists smashing through their ranks, her movements swift and lethal. She was no longer the broken woman Adam had first met. She was a warrior, and she was fighting for more than just survival. She was fighting for herself. As the battle drew to a close, Adam stood beside Arca, both of them covered in dirt and blood, their bodies battered but not broken. The Zarath Empire had been defeated, their forces decimated by the sheer power of the two warriors who had stood against them. For a moment everything was silent. Adam and Arca stood in the middle of the battlefield, surrounded by the fallen. The weight of what they had just accomplished began to sink in. They had done it. They had won. But it wasn't just about the victory. It was about something deeper, something more profound. Adam looked over at Arka, who was standing tall, her eyes fierce and filled with pride. He could see it in her expression. She had done it. She had found her strength, and for the first time she wasn't just a prize. She was a hero in her own right. Arka met his gaze, her face softening for the first time since they had met. "You were right," she said quietly. "I'm not just a prize, I'm more than that." Adam smiled, though it was small. "I never thought you were just a prize." Arka nodded, the faintest of smiles appearing on her lips. "I guess I had to see it for myself." As the victory celebrations began, Adam and Arka stood together, watching the people around them. The universe had changed for both of them. They had gone from strangers to allies, from enemies of circumstance to something more. And though their journey was far from over, Adam knew one thing for sure: they were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, and they had earned their place in the stars. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Adam felt hopeful. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that they would face them together. And that in itself was enough. The day after the battle, Adam and Arka stood together at the edge of the battlefield, overlooking the destruction they had caused. The Zarath Empire's forces had been completely overwhelmed, their warriors scattered and defeated. The sound of distant ships taking off and landing filled the air, the remnants of the fight still echoing in the distance. But for Adam and Arka, it felt like the calm after a storm. They had won. The fight was over, and the galaxy would be safer for it. But even in victory, there was a strange quiet that settled over them, a feeling neither of them could shake. The battle had been brutal, and it had left both of them exhausted. Adam was covered in cuts and bruises, his uniform torn in places. But it was nothing compared to what Arka had endured. Her massive frame was littered with scars, each one a reminder of her past, a reminder of the strength she had fought so hard to reclaim. She stood tall, but Adam could see the toll the fight had taken on her. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders sagging just slightly from the weight of everything. "I never thought I'd make it out of that alive," Arka said, her voice quieter than usual. She wasn't looking at him, her eyes focused on the wreckage in front of them. "I thought I was done. That maybe I wasn't meant to fight anymore." Adam stood beside her, watching the debris of the battle scatter in the wind. "You were meant to fight, Arka," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You just had to find the reason. You had to find something worth fighting for." She glanced at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and something else. Gratitude, maybe. It was the first time he'd seen her look at him this way, like she was truly seeing him for the first time. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted. "For so long, all I had was the fight. Now, I'm not sure." Adam understood what she meant. They had both been fighting for so long, each of them running from something, trying to fill the emptiness inside. For Arka, it had been about survival, about reclaiming what had been taken from her. For Adam, it had been about proving that he wasn't just a soldier, that he was more than the life they had given him. But now, the fight was over. They had accomplished what they came to do. The question was, what came after? "I think the hardest part isn't the fight itself," Adam said slowly, his voice thoughtful. "It's learning to live without it, learning to live without the constant battle." Arka turned to look at him then, and for a moment their gazes met. "I don't know how to do that," she confessed. "You don't have to figure it out all at once," Adam said with a small smile. "One step at a time." They stood in silence for a long moment, the quiet of the battlefield giving them space to think. Neither of them knew what the future held. There was still so much they didn't understand, so much they hadn't said. But in that moment, it didn't seem to matter. Adam had learned something in the time he spent with Arka. He had learned that people weren't defined by their pasts, by the battles they fought or the losses they suffered. People were defined by what they did with what they had, by the choices they made, and the people they chose to become. Arka had chosen to fight, not for the glory, not for the victory, but for herself. And in that, Adam saw her strength. It wasn't in the battles she fought or the enemies she defeated. It was in her ability to rise again and again, despite everything that had been taken from her. "I'm not going to stop fighting," Arka said, breaking the silence. "But I think I'll fight for something different now." Adam nodded. "That's all any of us can do, find something worth fighting for." She smiled then, a small, genuine smile that softened her features. It was the first time he'd seen her smile like that, the first time he saw a glimpse of the person beneath the warrior. He couldn't help but smile back. As they turned to leave the battlefield, heading toward the transport ships that would take them back to the fleet, Adam felt a sense of peace settle over him. The war was over, but their journey was far from finished. The universe was still a dangerous place, full of unknowns and challenges. But Adam wasn't afraid of the future anymore. He knew they could face whatever came next together. The trip back to the fleet was quiet, but not uncomfortable. The tension that had once existed between them had all but disappeared. Arca had opened up more in the days following the battle, though she still had a long way to go. But Adam was patient. He knew that trust couldn't be rushed, and he wasn't in a hurry. When they arrived at the fleet, they were met with applause and cheers. The people around them celebrated their victory, their strength, and their courage. Adam could see the admiration in their eyes, but it didn't matter to him. He didn't need to be celebrated. He didn't need the praise. He had already found something more valuable than any victory or title. He had found Arca. They were both survivors, both warriors, both broken in their own ways, but now they were something more. They were no longer defined by their pasts or their scars. They had found a new purpose, a new reason to keep going. And as the celebrations continued, Adam and Arca stood side by side, knowing that the future wasn't just about fighting. It was about finding peace, about learning to live in a world that didn't always make sense. But together, they knew they could face it. Together, they had already faced the hardest battle of all, the one to find themselves. The galaxy had changed, and so had they.